Well, welcome to episode 4, season 4, episode 7. We're going like crazy here, Keith. And
Good.
I want to welcome you. We have the world-renowned Keith Klein, um, certified clinical nutritionist, and so much more. So you are really the godfather of nutrition, and you're someone who's played a huge role in not only the contest prep life, but also the lifestyle prep when it comes to not eating right, but also eating right and relapse prevention. So we're going to dig into a lot of topics. You have been an advisor and a nutritionist for professional sports team here in Houston, many of them. You've also gotten a chance to talk to the state legislature about nutrition specifically, how that affects kids, how that affects adults, and really what the grocery store labels won't tell you. So Keith Klein, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much. Let me just clarify something. I'm not really the godfather of nutrition. What a label that's been given to me is I'm, what do they call, the godfather of eating management, right? And relapse prevention. That's really what I've been doing for the past 40 years. And so that's a little bit more of my title. Yeah.
Well, you know, this is something that I've known you for many years and gotten the chance not only to speak to you directly, but also talk to the people that you have impacted their lives by making sure that on their journey, no matter what that was, whether it be reading labels correctly and just becoming healthier for their family, whether it's a journey to the stage. I want everybody to know who's watching. We're on X and Twitter Live. We're on YouTube. I'm going to be seeing your comments throughout the show. Feel free to ask a question. Feel free to drop a comment. And also LinkedIn and Facebook. So there have been many of your clients that reached out to me on Facebook and like, where can I find this? I want to be watching this. And I'm just curious. You've been really practicing. I know you're retired from IEM, which is the Institute of Eating Management. You were the CEO. You were seeing patients on patients every single day. And how long have you been doing this for? I know it's 40 plus years, but when did you originally start this?
Early 1980. I worked at the Institute of Specialized Medicine, and we had a large group of doctors there, and I was the dietetic director of seeing all the patients. Because see, what happened at that time, they had never merged. This was before they merged nutrition with medicine. They just didn't jive. Doctors didn't really believe in it. They didn't know that much about it. So we were one of the first clinics, at least I know in Houston, and possibly even the state, that actually merged medicine along with nutrition. And my job was to understand the interactions between their medications, their diet. And what happened at first, we had 6 doctors there, and we had 3 clinics around Houston. And in the beginning, I came across 2 of those doctors who just really didn't want to have anything to do with what I did. They didn't believe in it. They didn't care about it. They wouldn't send their patients to me. But it didn't take long for them to see the benefits that when the patients were put on, let's say, a medication for blood sugar and we fixed their diet, many of these type 2 diabetics didn't need the medication anymore. And they really started to see more and more cases like that. Somebody with high blood pressure would lose 30 pounds. And the next thing you know, they didn't need the blood pressure medication anymore. So they started seeing all this. And the next thing you know, all the doctors were on board. And so it was a great time for me. I was working with all kinds of different cases, and it was mainly clinical, so yeah, we did some obesity there and weight loss and eating management, but it was formidable for me because I really learned the relationship between things like hormones and weight. And these guys were amazing teachers. And so I spent, 5 years there doing that. And then I left to go work with a psychiatrist. And Dr. John Sims and I opened 5 clinics nationwide. We had one in Atlanta, and I trained all the nutritionists. And then I kept the Houston base for myself to see patients. And that's where I really became enlightened to the psychological side of obesity, because all we did there mainly was eating disorders and proper weight loss. And that's where I first learned the damage that strict dieting does. And mentally, not only physically, but also mentally. And that was the beginning where I started to formulate my ideas on the psychology of eating management and relapse prevention. And then Dr. Ron Preston and I opened a clinic together. Dr. John Sims developed an ear infection that went into a brain infection, almost killed him. And we lost all of our clinics because he couldn't practice anymore. So Dr. Ron Preston and I opened the Houston Sports Medicine Clinic. And so this is where, my background in athletics and working with the Arrows hockey team, the Comets basketball team, and so many different, entities. This is where the sports all came together. And because I was a bodybuilder and I was a competitive bodybuilder, we drew in a lot of bodybuilders. So the thing that I walked away with was I had the clinical background. So I understood hormones, medications, and interactions. Then I had the psychological background. And I was at the psychology with Dr. John Sims for about 5 years. And then Dr. Preston passed away in 1990. And in 1990, because I've been working with these doctors, right, I realized, you know what, maybe I just need to open up on my own, because Dr. Sims, brain infection, Dr. Preston passes away. And that's when I opened up the Institute of Eating Management and Relapse Prevention Center, where I practiced for 40 years. I retired almost 4 years ago. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit, and there's some comments that came through. I know that Laura Beth Roberts Jackson, Keith has helped me for many years. Used to have a great radio show. You've been on CBS. You've had radio shows. You're a speaker. You have, many different books that you have written specifically that impacted our family. I got Kidtrition when I was a client there, and Keith.
You're the one who bought it, huh?
I'm the one, and many others, from what I understand, because I did look that up. And what was cool, and Grant Cardone says hello, by the way. He says, yeah, man.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you.
I'm looking at this, and I want you, when you talked about the nutritional part, that was one aspect. And I know in Beyond Weight Loss, which just came out on the leanbodycoaching.com website, for those of you who want to follow along, you can go to that website. It's on the ticker. You talked about the psychology as far as the reason why that most of the relapse prevention was effective. So I'm just curious, can you touch on that, on how important is the psychology and the nutrition married together?
Look, if you don't change the way you think about food, you're never going to be able to change what you do with food. And it is the most critical component. Of course, they're all equally important, changing, what you eat, but you also have to change how you think about food and exercise in order to have long-term success. Keep in mind, I'm not interested in the before and after pictures that you see. They don't really thrill me, because the before and after pictures that you see, what happens to that person after the picture's been taken? What I have on my website and what we put into the movie now, Beyond Weight Loss 1 came out 2.5 years ago. Beyond Weight Loss 2 is not out yet. And the first one focused on the element of knowledge, the idea that you can't change your viewpoint about food if you really don't understand what the label industry is doing, and how common it is for them to take a package of turkey and say it's 7% fat, and people actually believe that's a low-fat food, when in fact it has the same fat content as T-bone steak. So there's all these misconceptions. There's nothing worse than trying hard, thinking you're doing the right thing, only to discover it was all wrong. And so I call this eating management. That's what I'm the father of, really. I'm the father of eating management, right? Because I don't want people getting on a strict diet only to gain the weight back again. Now, when we put up these before and after pictures in the new Beyond Weight Loss, and also the first one, they're not before and afters. They're before, after, after. In other words, these people had to have kept their weight off. We have one of the guys in this new one has kept the weight off since 1990, and he looks incredible. We've got a guy in there that's 74 years old. Now, these are just mild ones. Like, look at the first one. That's Gretchen. She represents very much a very high majority of the people I work with. These other ones are minor. They weren't really that overweight. But Gretchen and Muriel represent normal, average people. And what they discovered is that they didn't have to give up their favorite foods to lose the weight. So when you're looking at our before and afters, keep in mind they're afters. These people have kept the weight off for 10, 20, 15, and 30 years, right? That's the people you need to talk to, because you need to ask them not so much what they ate, what was the mental things that you changed that allowed you to keep the weight off for 10, 15, 20 years? Because that's the only mark of success. If you got a 12-week before and after, that tells me nothing. But when you've kept the weight off for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, that's the mark of success. Matt, I want you to notice something. Now, this is how important the psychological component is. And I would say I can't say that it's more important than changing the food because it's equally as important. But have you ever noticed that the word psychological is two words put together in opposites of one another, right? Psycho and logical, okay? In other words, what I see most people doing when they attempt to move into a process of self-change is they usually are using psycho thoughts to do it. I'm going to get rid of all my favorite foods. I can't eat that anymore. And, it doesn't have to be painful, oppressive, or difficult, but you just have to take in the right information. And, for all the diet books you have out there, I mean, there could be thousands of them from, the beginning. Isn't it interesting that they just keep on coming out with another one? If any one of those books had the key to long-term success, we would have no need for all the others. But I don't know if you've noticed the diet industry, it's $1 billion industry and it moves quickly. And what diet are they talking about today? Well, they're talking about using drugs again. Well, how well did that work, right? Didn't you learn from fen-phen, where we developed massive cases of PPH, which is primary pulmonary hypertension, and the only cure to that is to get a lung and a heart transplant, right? Didn't we learn from HCG? I mean, name for me any drug that's come out that has created long-term success. I see the appeal of it because people don't want to work. Change can be difficult. Yeah, it can be. But if you have the right information, it doesn't have to be as difficult as most people make it on themselves. But I could go through drugs. Back in the 1940s, we had amphetamines. And amphetamines were being prescribed by doctors. They used to call them mother's little helper, right? And it helped with weight loss, appetite, right? But that didn't work out very well with all the psychoses that came out of that. They outlawed that one too. With these new drugs, these are just diabetic medications, and we have a huge problem in America. We have a massive number of overweight people, and that medication can be helpful. But here's the problem. If you don't change the way you think about food and you don't change what you're doing with your food, you can't stay on that medication forever, right? Because there are some serious side effects such as kidney failure, right? And the way that it works is it just makes you a bit nauseated so you don't feel like eating. I mean, that's basically the way it's really working. And so at the end of the day, I guarantee you, this is all the rage today. Everyone's talking about it. Give it a certain number of years, it'll be gone. Because again, all the drugs they've ever brought to market ended up being flops. This one will fall on its face too.
I think about medication and how it's designed. Modern medicine is great. However, food is really the human natural medicine. And if you treat it right, we talk about New Year, what now? This is kind of the theme and the going topic, because if we had a dime or a nickel for every time we heard, okay, my New Year's resolution is ... and you see the gyms completely packed. You
Right.
see the stores, maybe you're shopping the horseshoe, as I learned from you. Maybe you're trying to eat a little bit better. Where do people fall off the wagon? I mean, when you talk about it, and it doesn't have to be a New Year's resolution, it just has to be, I'm sick and tired of feeling like this, looking like this, and I want a long-term sustainable solution. What have you really taught in lean body coaching? And for those of you, I know Neil just put leanbodycoaching.com. You have so many, you have a wealth of resources and knowledge on there. Why do people fail when they make that New Year's resolution? What's that one psychological thing that just can't push them through when they get stuck?
There is no one thing. It's a multidimensional problem, and everybody's unique with their own problems. But at the end of the day, where it falls apart and they don't know it is the moment they start. Because if you're going to start on a diet, the first thing you have to ask yourself is the changes that I'm about to make sustainable? And I would contend that most of these diets aren't. You're never going to eat a potato again or rice, and you're just going to eat fat and protein. Look, I'm not putting it down. I'm saying if you feel you can eat that way the rest of your life and you feel it works for you and you feel better, then by all means do that. But for the vast majority of people that start on that kind of a diet, it's harsh, it's restrictive, it can be difficult for most people. Now, that's the beginning of failure. They just don't know it yet. It's almost like they're blind to the fact, because if you can't sustain the changes that you're making along the way, then you're destined to go back to what you used to do and fail. So it all begins with a change in the way you think about what you're about to embark on. My big thing is, look, you don't have to radically get rid of everything. In fact, the one thing that almost all of my long-term clients have discovered, which has made them part, it's a big component of their long-term success. The number one thing is this: they learned how to manipulate their recipes so they can still eat the foods they love and have them now be good for them, and they can lose the weight over the course of time. So if I just came into someone's house and I showed them, look, what's your favorite recipes? Give me 5, give me 10. That's why I wrote a cookbook for this, is because, look, if you take a recipe that calls for butter, just use light butter. Nobody will know. Nobody will, but you just cut the fat and calories in half. Now, it's not that I'm against fat, but that fat is calorie concentrated. It has over twice the calories of protein and carbs. So when you reduce that, it's a great way to reduce your calories and still be able to eat a large amount of food, which is normal human behavior. So I would contend that the way people start, they're starting with unrealistic expectations and they're doing things that they know they can't do the rest of their life. The other thing is they go on a super restrictive approach. Now, look, when you give up all your favorite foods, you're going to do great for a couple of weeks, okay? I mean, anybody can do that. But what happens when you encounter the stress, right? You start to get deprived. And so now every way you're looking, foods start to boom, 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 come into your head. So your goal, because you're on a new diet, is to not do it. You're not going to eat it. I can't have that. And when you say I can't have that, that interferes with the process of change. See, instead of saying I can't have that, here's one of those psychological kind of things. When you say I can't have that, you're already setting yourself up for feelings of deprivation. What I say is I say a few things. One, I could say, I just don't eat that anymore. And that takes on a whole different tone in my brain. The second thing is I want people to know that they never had to give those things up. But you know what? When I go to Beck's, instead of getting a 1,200 calorie hamburger, I get a kitty burger. I had a hamburger. I'm full when I'm done. It was great. It tasted terrific. I had a hamburger, but I got 400 calories, not 1,000 calories. See, those are the kinds of changes that are simple to make. But the number one thing that long-term success clients like yourself have learned is to alter their recipes in such a way that they can still eat their favorite foods and enjoy them and lose the weight and get healthy too. Yeah.
This is something that you just hit that was a little light bulb. And, when we talk about the psychological or we talk about the nutrition part when we're going to the store and eating, how important is a mentor or someone who knows what they're doing to help guide through this, especially that first part of the journey? How many people think they're eating healthy and not actually eating that way?
Well, coaches have coaches, right? I mean, Anthony Robbins has a coach. I think Oprah Winfrey has a coach. So, I mean, when you understand the value of, but this is very important, and I want to separate this. It's super important that you get the right coach, because there are bad coaches that just don't know they're bad. And they're the ones who are going to say, you can't have that. Okay, here's your diet for the next week. I want you to eat grilled dried chicken breast, steamed broccoli, and steamed rice. And they don't know that they're setting you up for psychological binges and problems with that, right? So a coach is critical, because why would you want to spend all that time when I have over 40 years of knowledge on how to do it correctly? Wouldn't you rather just come to me and ask me some qualified questions to save you the time, the energy, and the effort, and the money of going through all those other things, right? So I think that having a coach is important. When we talk about the psychological things, when I talk about changing food permanently, that's why I created the term better bad choices. It was 1983, I think. I was working with some eating disorder patients, and I wanted them to lose their fear of food. So that's where the better bad choices came from. So, and then in the psychology, I wrote several papers on one that I call the psychology of deprivation. And I walk people through the steps that they go through and then show them a more logical maybe statement at the end. So let's say you give up all your favorite foods, right? You're starting this new great diet. It's the New Year's. You're going to do great for 2 to 3 weeks until one day you encounter the trigger. The trigger is a negative emotional state of frustration, anger, and upset. The moment you encounter that, the cravings are going to hit you, but what you're going to do is resist. And you're going to resist by saying, no, I can't have that. Your ability to resist is going to end abruptly once you encounter another trigger. Now, when that trigger strikes, it's over, and you eat copious amounts of that food, that you get your hands on. Then, after binging, you no longer want the food. So you rationally say to yourself, well, I've blown it now. I might as well really blow it. So what the heck? And then off you go even more completely. And now that you've really blown it, what you do next is you start all over again with a renewed vow and commitment to do that strictness even stricter. And what does that do? It leads you. So that's what I refer to as the psychology of deprivation. And my response to that was to say to my clients, look, if you were driving down the road and got a flat tire, you would never jump out of your car and slip the other three. I mean, that's crazy, right? And that's what I mean about changing mindset. So, okay, if that's such a horrible approach to do, Keith, what's the right way? All right, let's not give up all your favorite foods. Let's now identify the top 5 things that you feel cause your overweight state. I eat too much red meat. I eat out too often. I don't cook my own foods, and go through that list. And then I say, well, look, let's just change one of them. Let's just take red meat because you love it and you're eating it 7 days a week. Can you tell me how many days can you live with it? And that person will say 2. Great. Let's take your red meat from 7 days a week to 2, and let's just do that for the next 2 weeks. That's all you got to do. It's not painful, hard, or difficult. When they come back, then I'll say, what's the next thing you'd be willing to change out of those 5 things we identified? And once they tell me, I'll say, okay, look, let's not stop eating out. Let me give you a booklet of all the Houston restaurants that have my menus in there so you can eat great tasting food. And let me show you how to navigate a restaurant. And look, if you go ahead and you get the wrong thing, maybe you take the other half home. I swear, I had a client that ate out at every meal. I'm not going to tell you her name because she's a very well-known political figure here. But she said to me, the only reason to have a kitchen was for the resale value of the house. She never cooked. So I asked her, I said, let me ask you something. Could you order what you would normally order, but let's not get into so much bread. Let's just eat less of it. And she said, well, I'm always so full. They serve me so much. So she decided she would eat out, but she'd eat half of what she used to eat. She lost 35 pounds. Now, that was she cut her food in half, right? Then we were able to say, okay, let's get a little more active, right? You don't do anything. What would you like to do? And her thing was dance. She really enjoyed dancing when she was younger. So would you be willing to go back to a dance class? Get them a little more active, right? And so that's all it took. I mean, it's not brain surgery, but the point was, I saw her not too long ago and she's still thin. And she said, I'm still doing what you told me to do. Now, she would take the other half home. And then what she would do is she would use that as her dinner, so she's still eating out because it's restaurant food. But the fact is her caloric consumption at one time went way down significantly. She wasn't overloading her body with an overload of calories, fat, sugar, and salt 3 times a day, right? And so by spreading that meal out, she's able to utilize it more and reduce the caloric intake at one time, Yeah. So
we're going to get into a fun question here, and maybe we'll have to do a little filtering on it. And
Okay.
For those of you who are just watching, you can follow Keith Klein. You'll notice on the ticker that you've got his Instagram right there at Keith Klein CCN. And you can also go to leanbodycoaching.com, which we're going to get into here in a segment, just a second. But I think about why the American diet, and I hate to use that word, but I just want to use it loosely in this. Why is American food so misunderstood? Because, the government required labels on our food. And when we go to the grocery store, it should be a simple way to look at things, but we have found that they're not as they appear. So
Right.
if the layman or the normal person who doesn't have a coach, who doesn't understand how to read these labels, what is this actually doing to harm this person as opposed to help them with their food choices?
Well, as I said in the beginning, is that if you're trying to do better and you're going to go out and you think you're doing the right thing, you may not be. One, you got to resolve that issue. You got to become knowledgeable. I will tell anybody, if you want to understand the knowledge somewhat of eating better, go watch Beyond Weight Loss. It's free. It's on Amazon Prime, and it's on most cable networks except for Netflix. So you can just go to YouTube. You can go to Amazon Prime. and you can watch the movie for free. And in there, I'm explaining these psychological concepts. That movie was all about knowledge. So let's face it, I think more importantly than just pinning the food labels, Matt, what you got to understand is there was a huge shift in American industry sometime in the 70s. So remember before the 70s, in the 60s, we had stronger family units, all eating at home with one primary breadwinner. Keep in mind that before the 1960s, we really didn't have TV, right? So before the 60s, we had some TVs out there, it was black and white. Most homes had one TV. By 1970, if you look at the USDA's Department of Food, they have a chart of commodities since 1900. From 1900 to 1970, sugar, flour, and fat stayed on a somewhat upward keel, but barely noticeable. 1970, it went like this, right? What happened in 1970? Well, you started seeing a greater amount of divorce. You started seeing two parents working instead of one. You started seeing homes with 2 and 3 TVs instead of one. And marketers discovered that when they started marketing their foods on TV, people bought and their sales went through the roof. And it's so profound that even children who couldn't spell their name knew the name McDonald's, right? And so what happened in 1970 is the commodities of sugar, fat, and salt just went straight up, and it's never gone down. The average American right now is consuming about 160 pounds of sugar per year. Now, that is all that takes is just a few cans of Coke a day, right? It's massive. So what I see happen was there was a shift in family units, television, media, advertising. Because if you go back to the 1960s and early 60s and 50s, I remember TV. It had 3 stations. It's black and white. We didn't have, and the commercials were just like for Rolaids and stuff. But I also noticed something even worse today. And that was the day that Congress allowed drug companies to begin marketing their drugs, because they were outlawed from doing that for a while. And then when they opened that up, don't you notice that there's just a plethora of drug advertisements on TV these days? And who are they advertising to? Well, they're not just telling the doctor and educating the doctor that these medications are out. They have reps for that. They're telling the people that this is the drug you want to ask for. So now what doctors more recently found, people were coming and asking for the drug. Look at semaglutide. It's a peptide, right? But it has brought in billions of dollars, and it's only been here, I don't know how long it's been out, but it hadn't been that long. So I would think, it's amazing today that here we are with all of this knowledge and all of these different choices and available things to us, and we're heavier than we've ever been, and we're continuing to get heavier. When I went to high school, I don't recall hardly ever seeing any overweight people. I think we had 2, maybe 3 that I can remember. Most of the people in the high school were thin, fit, right? But boy, look at it today. When I go into a high school and lecture, I'm just astounded by it, because once again, these children aren't growing up in a traditional family sense. The single mom is stopping, her dad is stopping for fast food along the way to school and along the way back home. And so the plethora of fast food establishments that's happened, food design, we've got a copious amount of new foods out with new designs that were never there before. You can now eat purple purple cauliflower, right? And carrots have more nutrition than they ever had because they started inbreeding other gene splicing on these things. So I think that it's a multidimensional problem. There is no one reason why everyone's overweight. It's just there's a lot of reasons why people are overweight and struggling. The other thing that we're seeing is a vast number of children today coming down with type 2 diabetes. This is something that we just never saw. So when I was in clinical practice 40 years ago, over the years, I started seeing these huge shifts. In 1990, I wrote a book called Weight Control for Young America, because I saw the upcoming obesity problem happening. And sadly to say, it's worse today than it's ever been, because when you get a child overweight, we used to think, when I first started in nutrition, we were actually taught that you were born with a set number of fat cells, and that you had this set number of fat cells, and that's all you'll have. Then I guess about 20 years ago or so, we discovered hyperplasia. And what that means is that when a fat cell enlarges to a certain point, then it hyperplasias and creates two fat cells. So now your 2 can become 4, and your 4 can become 8, and your 8 can become 16. Now, once you acquire a new fat cell, you don't get rid of it unless you do lipo or something like that, which I'm not supporting. But once you acquire these new fat cells, you will always have them. And they're little factories to try to keep themselves full. The worst thing you can do to a child is make them overweight. And it's so sad to see because, they're not going to get as many dates maybe in high school. Their life is going to be limited. It shouldn't be, but a lot of people are going to have a limited life due to their obesity. And so consequently, when you see a child that's overweight, what you just happened here is it gets that much harder to help them lose weight as an adult because of the excessive fat cells they've accumulated around, which does alter your hormonal levels. So when a guy gains too many fat cells, his fat cells begin absorbing testosterone. And that's why a lot of times you'll see overweight men that have kind of supple skin and little tits, for gynecomastia. And because they have an estrogen dominance, which also then makes it harder for them to lose weight because their testosterone's low and their estrogen's high. Same thing happens to women. If you've ever seen women with facial hair that are obese, right, that's a condition because their fat cells are absorbing estrogen, and now testosterone becomes a more prominent hormone, and they develop more secondary male characteristics. So once you start gaining weight as a youngster, it's going to be really hard to get them to become a thin adult for all those different reasons. There's many others, but those are just, some quick ones.
Yeah. You mentioned, and I think a lot of people don't know what to really test for when it comes to blood work, and, when should they start testing? And even kids we're seeing are noticeably more inactive because they have something at their fingertips called a phone. They've got controllers in their hand for Xbox and PlayStation. And frankly, sports, they're still there, but it's just a much different standard or regimen than I was used to when I played football or basketball or when we were bodybuilding. It's an extreme demand on physical exercise that allows us to expend those extra calories if we do take in, and they're not seeing that. So let's talk about adulthood for a second, because I want to talk about blood work. Okay. I am an extreme fan of getting it done at least every 6 months, not because I'm worried that something's going to be out of range. It's because I care more about my family and me being here and having a life expectancy past 80 years old instead of being overweight and then having massive heart and kidney problems at 50 years old. So can you talk about the importance of getting your blood work done and what should be looked for in that panel?
Okay. First of all, it's critical to what I did for a living, because the first step of change when somebody came in to see me who wanted to lose weight was to fix their lack of knowledge. So it's all in what I call knowingness. The first film, Beyond Weight Loss, right? However, there would be that worked for the vast majority of people, just fix their unknowingness. However, then there'd be a subset of people that weren't responding to that change as well as you would normally see or expect. And that's when I turn to hormones. That's the second place, okay? After I've examined food diaries, make sure they're working out and eating right, there are just some people who can't lose the weight because they don't know they have an undiagnosed hormonal situation. The big one that you hear everybody talk about is thyroid, but it's not the only one. We've seen hyperprolactinemia, where in the absence of a tumor in their pituitary, no breast milk coming out. Hyperprolactinemia is a really hidden purpose or reason for weight gain in a lot of women. Maybe they had a baby and they never lost the weight, but nobody will check their prolactin because they're like, you're not pregnant. We don't need to do that. So we had a really well-defined system of, look, we want this blood workup done. Now, a lot of doctors won't do it all. And so if you just walk into your doctor and say, I want you to check my thyroid, a lot of them will just run a TSH. Now, there are a lot of great doctors out there, but I am talking about general practitioners who don't have the background in obesity and thyroid function, so they just run a TSH. That stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. It really is a measure of your pituitary, okay? Now, if that's really high, that sounds good. It was really bad, all right? So if it's really high, you have hypothyroidism. Now, That's what a bad doctor will do. Okay. And I don't mean to say bad. I just mean to say
Uneducated.
it's just, yeah, it's sad. Now, a better doctor will run a TSH, a T3, and a T4. Now, T3 is the active thyroid hormone. This is the one that regulates your metabolic rate. And T4 is inactive. But what's good about T4, and this is called Synthroid, is doctors like to prescribe this, but it's the inactive form. Now, what your body will do with the T4 is it'll come along and deionize. These are 4 iodine molecules. It'll deionize one of those and create T3, which is the active. But you know what, Matt? A lot of people are not converters. They don't deionize. They just have something within their body, which we'll talk about in a second. So when a doctor just prescribes T4, in my world of weight loss, I hate to see that. It works in some, but again, we like to see a blend of T4 and T3 together. All right. So when we see that, this is the active thyroid hormone. In case they're not a converter, they still get it. We look at their blood workup. Okay. And that's a good doctor. But you know what a great doctor is, Matt? He's going to run antibodies. He's going to look for thyroid globulin antibodies. He's going to look for, that's the TPO, the peroxidase antibodies. He's going to look to see if you have Sjogren's disease, right? Those are antibodies. Over the career, there's a before and after picture I have of a woman that could never lose weight. When I got her blood work up, I was astounded that she not only had antibodies, it was the highest level of antibodies I've ever seen, and she had no T3 and she had no T4, and her TSH was the highest I'd ever seen it. I think it was almost in the 50s. I didn't even know you could measure that high. And I was like, my God, girl. And she goes, I go, haven't you ever had your thyroid checked? And she said, well, my doctor said it was okay. I'm like, look, man. So she had Hashimoto's disease, which is a high level of antibodies. And what happens there is you got the T3, but this antibody comes along and locks it up in the bloodstream. So it never makes it to the receptor sites. And so there's some cures that we can give them. So once we got her on the right combination of thyroid and also a small amount of something called naltrexone, a small amount at night before bed, and that really helped bring the antibodies down. And if I could, I wish I don't know how to pull up pictures on my screen here, but I'll tell you what, she is astounding. She's kept the weight off now, I'm going to guess about 6 or 7 years. She went from about 280, maybe over that. And now she's an instructor at a spinning school. She looks incredible. But that could, see, fixing her food would have never worked for her. But how many times do people go into their doctor and they get overlooked? Now, sometimes it's not that it's a bad doctor. It's that insurance companies block that stuff because there's an expense attached to it. Now, those aren't the only hormones I'm going to look at for women. As I said, prolactin is huge. And I only have to test it once. You know, so once we test the prolactin and it's normal, that's great. But if it's high, then we have to have an MRI to make sure there's no tumor. And Dostinex, when the doctor prescribes Dostinex to get that prolactin down, the weight pummels off of them. And so estrogen is very important because if you have estrogen dominance, too much estrogen, it's going to be very difficult for you to lose weight. And so we need to know, are you in menopause? Because menopause presents a whole nother set of challenges as well. See, so I just got to tell you, the hormones are the second most important thing that I'm doing next to fixing their knowledge, right? And so then there's the third level of this. If you don't mind that I say this, am I okay to talk about the third level?
We're unfiltered, uncensored.
It's not bad or anything, but it's the psychological component. There are going to be some people who've been traumatized in their childhood. And this isn't all people. But what we find is that when we fix the hormones, if they still don't lose, I'm going to ask a series of questions. Now, keep in mind, I'm not psychoanalyzing my patients. I'm trying to gather enough information to determine, would this person benefit by quality therapy? And so I had a great group of doctors on our team. Kim still has them to this day that we use. We have a great group of psychiatrists that we use, and they're trauma experts. And here's what's so fascinating about it. The trauma leaves them with an emptiness. And one of the most common traumas that a person can experience is that they had a mother that wasn't present, that didn't hug them enough or let them know they were loved or was abusive or whatever. And that leaves them with a hole, really, that they try to satisfy through food. And some people try to satisfy it by drugs, and others try to satisfy it by using alcohol. But here's the amazing thing. After just a few sessions, have you ever watched the show My 600-Pound Life? Have you seen that?
And it's on a lot.
Okay, there's a psychiatrist on there named Dr. Paradise. Okay, he's a friend of mine, but he does great trauma work. What you discover is after he's seen him, I think 4 or 5 times, the weight just starts coming off. And so it's an interesting phenomenon. I don't think we fully understand why they can't lose. I mean, they keep food diaries, but once you resolve the trauma, then they start losing weight. And that's the third area that I moved to. It's not a big area of my practice, but it was, I would see at least maybe 3 or 4 patients a month who we would have to go down that route, So I feel like what I put together with my background was we had the sports component, the psychological component, the clinical component, and really for obesity, just giving somebody a diet is really lacking in those other areas. And consequently, that's why a lot of failure happens is people don't understand there's those 3 fundamental components that if any one of those 3 is wrong, you're probably going to be stuck with your weight no matter how many diets you did if you don't fix those basic underlying issues.
Well, you've definitely got some activity, especially with Nancy on X. And that's great because a lot of people don't really know how to pinpoint or diagnose certain things if they don't understand that their doctor, what they're telling them is going base level or surface level.
Right.
And you've got different resources or tools that you can use to find out the whole picture or the full component.
So the trauma thing, where I first learned about that, Matt, was when I was working with a psychiatrist. I was oblivious to it, right? But we spent 5 years together before he had to bow out. He went deaf. He lost his hearing. He couldn't practice anymore, Can we take some questions? Is that something you want to do?
We can definitely do that. But here's the thing. You've talked about a doctor passing away, going deaf. I mean, everybody's around you. You seem to have been very healthy throughout your life in these last 40 and 50 years. And it seems like they have something to learn from you, I think.
Listen, I don't even know that I should say this because people always say, you got to write a book. The first doctor I worked with was a wonderful physician. His name was Dr. Bashinsky, not the same cancer doctor here. He was from Russia. And he's the one that brought DNP, dinitrophenol, to America. He was working with the the Navy. And his job was to go through Russian medical journals to see if he could pull out anything about medicine that would be helpful. And that's where he came across dinitrophenol. And dinitrophenol, the Russians were giving just a tablet to the Siberian troops because it raised their body temperature a constant 1 degree. And that kept them warmer. So what happened out of that? The Navy ships began putting dinitrophenol in their life craft, right? So when they go overboard, they could stay warm and survive. Okay, so he knew that was going to be a great weight loss drug. I disagree with that because it's chemicals and it has a lot of side effects. It's used in explosives, Kodak film development, insecticides. But let me tell you something, it worked. It raised people's body. They were sweating all the time, right? And it was like they had a mild fever and the weight was just pummeling off of them. But what he was doing was he owned his own pharmacy, which you're not supposed to do. And he was making $70 million a year. Johnny Holmes, who was our district attorney, wanted him to go down for this manufacturing of dinitrophenol. And he went to prison for 20 years for income tax evasion. They never could get him to shut down the dinitrophenol, but they finally got him income tax evasion. So he was a wonderful man, right? And then the psychiatrist, Dr. John Sims, that happened to him. And then Dr. Preston, unfortunately, committed suicide. He was going through a really rough time. And that's when I decided either doctors are bad for me or I'm bad for doctors. I'm not doing this anymore. And that's when I opened up my own place 40 something years ago.
Well, you've had a long track record of working with everyday individuals. You've had a long track record of working with prominent individuals and people who you're seeing, like, for example, in this picture, and I know you wanted to, say, how do I pull those pictures up? This was a young lady that I noticed when I was looking at your leanbodycoaching.com. She has kept the weight off. She lost 60 something pounds in year 2 and 3. She's still there. What would you say when people come to you? Why do people stick with you? Because I know that I continue to learn from you even 7 years later. And it's not just what you taught me, it's what other people learn from you that they still quote you on. So why is it important to have a sustainable coach and also a continued mentor when you're going through your journey?
Here's why I think that's so, man. And I really appreciate the kind words. That's very nice of you. When you find the truth, you recognize it, right? I was never, I never sold crap in my clinic. I sold a cookbook, okay? And I sold a couple of my books, but I decided from the beginning, I'm not selling supplements. That's for the vitamin stores, right? I'm certainly not going to go down the path of any kind of appetite suppressants or anything like that. And so what happens is, I think most of the people that I saw, I learned more from them probably than they learned from me, because every time somebody brought in a new issue, I would have to get very creative. And I just seem to have a skill of taking this topic and turn it into something that, like, don't slip the other 3 tires, right? Or in the anatomy of a binge, I outlined, systematic. So when I can show you the steps you're going through, you can see it, so that before you get to that final step, you're now giving coping skills on what to do. But I think because of the blend of psychology with our connections to the doctors that ran the right hormonal profiles, with the knowingness, I was a consumer activist, so I fought against deceptive labeling. So I picked up on that stuff real quickly, and also deceptive supplements. And so what happened was, when people were coming, because we had such a multidimensional approach, the results were so much better than what normal people were getting anywhere else, because of the blend, right? If we needed to talk psychological stuff, we would. And you know what? It was as simple as somebody would come in and sit down in front of me and literally say, I'm so fat. I'd say, whoa, wait, stop. Let's just stop right here. Where do you remember the first time you told yourself that? And I remember this girl saying, and then I'd also tell them to bring in a picture of them, right? So this was an interesting story. I asked her when was the first time you remember being fat? She said, well, I was in high school, and I was getting ready for my prom, and I spent the whole day doing my makeup, getting my nails done, getting the right dress. And she said, you know what? For the first time in my life, I felt beautiful. She said, I stood up in my room and looked in the mirror, and I really thought, for the first time ever, I feel beautiful. And she's from Dallas. She was coming down one of those big stairwells when her mom said, your date's here. She's coming down the stairwell, and she really wanted and craved and needed her mom's approval. And she just was so proud of herself, but she really wanted her mom to be proud of her. As she's walking down the stairs, the mother looks up and goes, oh, honey, you look so beautiful. If you were just 10 pounds lighter, that dress would fit better. Right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Okay. So I said, all right, let me ask you something. And she said, I remember the moment that my mother took us outside with a camera. I remember the moment she clicked that camera, and I was standing there, and I said, I'm going to look fat in this dress. So I said to her, I said, look, do you have that picture? She said, I do. I said, first of all, you're not allowed to call yourself fat anymore. Secondly, I want you to bring that picture in. And when she did, it was the most gorgeous 17-year-old girl in a beautiful dress. She looked stunning. And I said, let me get this straight. When you look at this picture, you think you're fat? She said, oh, no, not when I look at that picture. And I said, well, let me ask you, don't you wish you were that fat now? And she goes, yeah. I said, you were never fat. It's possible that you're not fat. You got to quit saying that. You know what you need to say? I'm just carrying some extra weight that I'm going to get rid of. Okay. Let's get rid of the idea that you're fat, because it's been doing all this harm all these years, And so I got her to acknowledge she really wasn't fat back then. See, that was really powerful for her. Right. So it's that kind of thing that if you can do that for somebody, and you're doing great work, because the beauty of today, I've been retired 4 years, and I got people reaching out to me all the time saying, I want to thank you for, helping me. I still kept the weight off. So it's a great feeling, man. I do miss that.
Well, you are in the community and people, you run into them at the grocery store, you run into them, when you're out. And that's a great feeling to know that you help somebody, not just for that short interim, but they're still
Sure.
living the lifestyle that you allowed to continue to sustain. So
Yeah.
there was a question here. And before I go to that right now, Crypto Billy asked something. I do want to be able to, invite people. For those of you who do follow Keith Klein on Instagram, it's Keith Klein CCN, or you can go to the website at leanbodycoaching.com. I want to get maybe just a few questions, and then I want you to touch on lean body before we wrap. So,
Okay.
Crypto Billy asked, let's see here. Man, we have so many questions. I'm going to probably have to limit them, but it says I'm on
You know
synthyroid.
what, Matt?
Yeah,
Feel free to tell them to ask me questions if they go to my Instagram page. Okay.
perfect, perfect. And we can do that. But I'm curious, if you know someone who's on synthyroid, what should he ask his doctor?
Well, first of all, if his numbers are good, then he's probably a converter. If he's not struggling with his weight, it's a non-issue. And another connection to having low thyroid is high cholesterol. So a lot of people with high cholesterol actually have a dysfunctional thyroid. But he should ask for, I really like Armor. It's a blend of, it doesn't have a lot of T3, but it has about 10 micrograms, I think, of T3 along with T4. And that's called Armor Thyroid. Yeah. And remember, thyroid has to be taken on an empty stomach. It cannot be taken with food. And I hate to tell you this, you can't even drink coffee with it. If you want the full effect of it, it has to be on an empty stomach. And that works when you wake up in the morning, pop it. Or if you even wake up in the middle of the night to urinate, pop it then, go back to bed. Because it's in your body 24 hours, whether you take it at 3 a.m. or take it at 7 a.m., right? But you cannot take thyroid with food or it's not going to do its job.
Yep. And I do want to respect your time. As I look at this, there is something I want you to touch on. And so you might not see me just for a quick second. You might see our screen a little different, but I'm going to kind of give the viewers a little bit of an idea for what we have been able to experience. And as I like to explore, if you can you see your website right now on the screen?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Perfect. So, as I'm looking through here, you do lean body coaching and you go to Amazon Prime. Here is the link to the Amazon Prime video if you want to watch it for free.
Right.
It's something that I was extremely intrigued about. And, I'm always kind of that guy for wanting to know more. And this is this now. Why did lean body coaching come to you and want you to be a big part of this? And I'm just curious as far as how this has helped so many people just recently.
Lean body coaching didn't come to me. I created it. I did we have like 80 videos, 60 videos on there. I did all the videos. What I wanted when I left my practice was I wanted to be able to continue helping people on a much larger scale rather than one-on-one. So I went to Lee Labrada, who owns Labrada Nutritionals. And I said, Lee, look, would you be interested in teaming up with me? Because I had right there's Ken. That guy's kept that weight off since 1990. Yeah. I said, look, I want to be able to do what I do in the clinic, but put it all online. But Lee, I don't have that skill set. And he said, but I do. He goes, I got the web guy, Simon Harrison. So Lee Labrada is a partner in this, as is Simon Harrison. And so Simon Harrison takes care of all of our intricate inner workings, and then Lee made it all possible. See Mike right there? Do you know that? Now, when he came to see me, he was 57, and now he's 74. That's the before, that's the after. And now it's 16 years later, and he looks exactly like that still.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he basically almost looks like he reversed aged.
Totally. Everyone comes up to him and can't believe he's 74 years old. Yeah.
Gosh, wow. Well, I think when I came to you, you had the idea, you were the founder, you were the creator, you were someone who was able to kind of visualize, you just needed the tech part of it to actually get it going.
Yeah.
For someone who maybe is looking to get started, what's the best way to contact you? What's the best way to kind of take that first step into the world as far as the new world for 2024 and not look back?
Well, first of all, they just go to that website and they're going to set up a free call to talk to Christina. And Christina, who has also been a client of mine, is just wonderful. We have no pushy sales. We're just going to answer your questions. And so she's the one that takes all the calls. She'll talk directly to you and she'll decide if you're a good fit for us. as well as are we a good fit for you? See, there have been people we've turned away because they've just got issues that I don't feel we're going to be qualified to help them. I don't want to take their money. So, I'd rather do the right thing and lose money than do the wrong thing to make it. And so we do turn some people away. We only have a certain number of coaches. They've all been trained under me, and they're fantastic. But it's very hard to find somebody who possesses the skill set. Now, I can train anybody on the educational side, but you know what? You can't train them on the personality side. And so you want to have people that they're like mini-me's, their knowledge is there. And if they come across something they don't know, they all reach out to me and say, share with me what we do. They're on this medication or that, right? Now, what this isn't, it's not really an athletic site. We're not getting people ready for shows at all. This is really eating management. This is for people who have that 10, 15, 20, or 100 pounds they want to lose. It's a 6-month program, by the way. So the other thing is, if you're going to commit to us, be committed. Yeah, we offer refunds, but the reality is if this is something you want to do, we'll teach you the skill set. Yeah. Now, everybody that's on there, part of our relapse prevention is we have a Facebook page in Lean Body Coaching, and I'm constantly putting thoughts in there, and we have a featured button. And then every article I've ever written, this has been up, Lean Body Coaching's been here for 5 years. Every article I've ever written is databased in there. Every new recipe, I put up 5 new recipes just last week. Chicken Alfredo. You will have no idea that it's healthy and low fat. And what their response was, my kids ate it. That's a great testimonial right there, Yeah. So they have access. That is a private Facebook, so only members are allowed to be on, and they're allowed to be in there for life. So after the 6 months, that's where they stay connected to us. That's where they get constantly new updated materials.
And by the way, I cannot tell you how much it means to be able to have more time with you. This is kind of a part 2. We got a little personal on the part 1 on the Instagram, which is still on our Instagram. And we talked about Snickers, and we talked about your squirrel that you hand feed daily, yeah. I think. Is it multiple times a day at this point?
Twice a day, every day. I have 4 of them. Yeah, they're really cute. It's amazing you take a wild animal and they trust you so much, they'll jump up on your lap, sit on your shoulder, eat a nut, but they live outside. I'm not putting a squirrel in my house.
You one bit. But that's what's cool. You're on Facebook. You share your personal life with us. You also share your knowledge. You share your expertise. And this is, I don't think anybody really retires when they find a passion that they continue to love to do and continue to wake up for. And you're that person. Yeah. If the amount of experience in the last 45 to 50 years you've accrued and just left to yourself, that's doing the world a disservice. And you choose to do this on a daily basis.
So, way to think of it. Yeah.
And what's the best way that people can contact you? Is it Instagram or is it Facebook?
I'm more active on Facebook. I'm not real active on Instagram, but I will be if somebody sends me a message there, and if they go and scroll all the way down, they're going to see a huge history of after photos of people. So if you go on Instagram and scroll all the way down to the beginning, in the beginning, I just focused all on weight loss. And since I retired, it's just all kind of personal stuff mixed with a little bit of that stuff.
That's super cool. And I have to say, Keith, I know that our time has come, and we've been on for 60 straight minutes. We might even need to do a part 3 if we could really dig into that, if you're willing to do that with us. But
hey, I'm retired.
Yeah. When you're retired, you got to what am I going to do with my time? I mean, feed the squirrels, get Snickers for a walk. I get you. But I think we can dig into part 3 with me.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't hear you the last part.
I wanted to say thank you so very much for having me. I appreciate it a lot, man. Thanks.
No,
and I'm happy to come back.
This is great. What we're going to do is this is going to be syndicated, and you're going to be able to go watch the replay. So if you just joined us, I saw a bunch of people just jump on. Keith has a wealth of knowledge that I think just for some of the basic steps, you'll be able to introduce those into your life, your kids' life, your friends, your family. They're going to notice differences. And Keith is a great mentor to be able to get connected with. leanbodycoaching.com. Keith Klein, CCM on Instagram, and Keith Klein as well on Facebook. So Keith, hope you have a great new year. Looking forward to hopefully part 3 soon, and tell Kim hi and Snickers, and we wish you the best, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Matt. Keep up the great job. All right. You're doing great.
You got it. Thank you. And until then, we will look forward to seeing you. Next time, we will have next week our next guest. This is going to be episode 8 already of season 4, and they're flying by. So can't wait to see you. I appreciate the love, the questions, the comments, and we look forward to seeing you back next Friday. Take care.